Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Today, I'm going to show a track that I just released this week. It's a progressive house trancey track, EDM, dancey. It's called Neon Rain. I released it on my SoundCloud and my YouTube just a few days ago, and I'm pretty happy with where it ended up. I worked on this track for a month, so have a goal in 2022 to release at least one original track per month, and so started this around the new year, released it right at the end of January, so I'm on track so far, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it sounds. So today I'm just gonna play it through so you can hear it, dive into Ableton as usual, and kind of zoom in on different parts, kind of show how I did it, what I did with various tracks within the track, and I'll probably play it one more time at the end as well. But yeah, here we go. So without further ado, the first thing that I will do is I will mute my microphone and then click play, and we can listen to the track all the way through. It is a 5-minute track, so I hope you enjoy it. Alright, that was the track. Hope you enjoyed it. Let's dive in one layer at a time. Naturally, let's start with the drums layer, all the percussion. I had a lot of fun kind of designing the groove and the various percussion hits for this track, so I used the drum rack for that. It starts out pretty simple. You can see here the notes that I have programmed in, and for the various pieces of the drum rack, which you can see on my drum track, kind of starts out simple, adds more and more stuff and various percussion hits over time. Then we get to, then it actually drops out for a bit, builds it back up, does that for a while. Then we get to this middle breakdown section where it's more, symphonic. You've got kind of more of the atmospheric sounds and stuff, and so the drums are pretty much missing for that whole breakdown naturally. Then it kind of comes back in, builds back up to that third section, but I don't drop everything. I don't add everything all at once when I hit that drop at the beginning of the third section, this part here. You see the drums actually start pretty simple and then work their way back up, adding various things and various hits until they get to the full kind of thing going on here. And then even as I go into more of the outro, I add some like ride cymbal crashes and such. And then as I approach the end, I start to subtract out different layers until it gets pretty simple again, until the end. So I'm not gonna play the drum track all the way through, but just so you can see kind of how I structured it. It's adding and subtracting stuff over time, progressing, as you might say. So when you look at the actual drum rack, I used samples for each different hit. So I have everything from, let's start with the kick. It's a nice kick. It's from Sophie's sample pack, a nice dry kick. You can see I tuned it a bit, adjusted the fade, saturated it a bit, EQ'd it a bit, and I'm pretty sure I tuned it to match the key of the track, which was D minor, so I tuned it to a D. That's the kick. Very nice sounding kick. Clap. I didn't end up using that one. This low moan sound, which was suggested in the previous stream, which I ended up inserting in certain parts, like you can hear it over here, for example. And I'm very sure that's a D or as well, or maybe an F or something, but it's definitely in the key. Clap. Let's see if I do anything to the... Okay, yep, pretty basic stuff there. On the clap, again, I adjusted the tuning and the fades. Also EQ'd it a little bit just to sound a little sharper, punchier. It's a very cutting clap. And then for the various hats, I have many different hats. I have this hat. And you'll notice on some of these I have a little bit of reverb. Just a teensy bit, so it sounds a little more natural. This ride, that comes in near the end, as I showed. This cymbal, again, a little bit of reverb on that. This hi-hat, a little bit of reverb, a little bit of stereo width. This reversed hat, I reversed it to get that little swooping sound. A little bit of reverb on that as well. This ride, this crash. Yeah, all of these have been faded, tuned, EQ'd. This tiny little hi-hat. This one. And finally, you might have noticed that it goes, there's this little like boop, 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 boop sound that goes that goes repeatedly, like it's like 16th notes or 8th notes, maybe in 32nd notes. It gets louder as it goes. It has this little peak right here at like 300 hertz. And you'll notice if I go in here, basically this rim shot reload right here, what I did was I adjusted the velocity so it's like quiet and then louder, quiet and then louder. So it gives it a little nice feeling and a little bit of dynamics. yeah, and in terms of the rhythm, you can see I have some syncopation, but otherwise it's pretty straightforward. Even when I get to this part, it's like put some of those closed hats on the offbeats, and when I approach the drop, naturally I'm doing a bit of an auto filter there. Let's see where else, yeah. So when I approach the breakdown, I also did that auto filter to take out the lows. You can see that moving right there. More auto filters as I come out of the breakdown, and even during the third section. So yeah, the drums provide a very solid beat and groove for the whole track. Nothing too crazy going on there, but I did spend a lot of time kind of picking out the right samples and making sure they mesh well together. The whole drums track does have a glue compressor on it. Oops. Just to tie things together and give it some extra oomph. So that is the drums. And then let's go to the bass line. So that's the repeated kind of rhythmic bump, 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 bump that you hear the whole track, which is this. So for most of the track, it does that. Then in certain parts, you'll notice that it changed notes. So like over here in the third section, and then, and then, and then, and then, and then. So that was cool. How did I make that sound? So this is two layers. One is a stereo layer, one's a mono layer. So just to show you what I did here, it is a Serum synth. Let's wait for it to pop open. One of these presets, but I did change some of these LFO parameters and Attack Decay's ADSR envelopes and stuff like that to shape it how I wanted it, but essentially this is the core sound. So after it comes out of the Serum synth, I did do a sausage fattener on there, I did compress it, I did EQ it, I did use the Native Instruments Transient Master to make it a little more punchy. And then of course I sidechained it to the kick and the snare, or the kick and the clap. There we go, I was just showing that Transient Master here. So this track here is the mono one, and then this track here is the stereo one. And I did that on purpose because I think I wanted to do a little bit more effects on the stereo version, but have the mono one kind of be solid in there the whole time. So like for example, I'm trying to think where I might have done some of that automation and effects, like let's check it out. Maybe like here I did some stereo, oh there we go, yeah, so you can tell I did some effects, and when you listen to the mono one, it is doing an auto filter, so it is changing a bit, but I played a lot more with the left-right pan on the stereo one. So hopefully you can hear that's kind of bouncing back and forth between the left and the right ear. So together, that's a nice little effect. What do I actually have on the chain here? I've got Serum R-Bass, which is a nice saturator, I think essentially is what it is, which brings out some of the higher harmonics on the sound, which, as far as I understand, will help it sound more bassy. Actually, it will make it sound more full, especially when it's playing on, like, I don't know, MacBook Pro speakers or something that doesn't have like a sub. I like the way it sounded with it on, so I kept it on, but I didn't push it too much. It's like a very, it's not really, I didn't crank it up too much or anything, and I set that frequency to 74, which I think is a D. Again, that's the key of the track. Compressed, EQ, typical stuff here, some overdrive, Ozone Imager, Transient Master, typical stuff that you see on a lot of my tracks. And then I bass monoed it, sidechained it. So that is the bass line. You know, my favorite part is kind of in the third section here, when it's kind of changing chords and stuff. And also near the end when it also kind of changes a bit to kind of signify that the outro is ending and that the song is coming to a close. So like that was this part here. I'll just play it. Goes down, goes up. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, so that's the bass line. Let's see, like that. And naturally, to give it a little extra oomph, I had a sub that just follows the bass line. So I made sure that every time, I think pretty much every time, yeah, looks like it follows it. That the sub is following the bass notes, so that it's always in tune and doing the same stuff. So the sub is one of the built-in Ableton synths, subspecies synth bass. Sounds cool. Low passed it mono, kept that sub completely mono. So here's the sub by itself. Depending on the speaker system you're listening on, you may or may not be able to hear that very well. But just going boop, 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 like the actual MIDI notes are very short. But together with the bass gives it some extra oomph. Let's do it over here. You know, it's following the kick basically, so like. Boop, just really gives it some extra oomph. I look forward to playing that on a huge ass speaker system at some festival somewhere and just feeling it reverberate in my bones. The next track or sub-track, you know, here is the drone bass, which really fills out the track. The synth that I use for this is FM8 from Native Instruments, and I used this Baby Got Beef preset. But I probably changed some of these effects and stuff as well, or at least dragged around the Easy Morph matrix square thing, which is a nice way to tweak the sounds. Similarly here, I do have our bass on there, but I only turned it on for the second and third sections of the song to kind of have it really have some extra oomph. And then I'm pretty sure I'm doing like various auto filtering and stuff too. Yeah, look at that. I'm kind of moving around the threshold of the low cutoff. As the track moves, I just wanted to give it some more movement. There's definitely some stereo stuff going on with this layer as well. Like look at that. I just went up, down, up, down, up, down, kind of not randomly, but intentionally in certain parts to give the bass drone more of a stereo with some movement there, left-right movement. But you'll notice I did keep bass mono on for a reasonable amount of frequencies because you don't want too much. Well, I don't know. It's up to you, but I don't want to have too much really low-end bass kind of going back and forth, left and right. Track spacer here is sidechaining. Looks like I sidechained it to that guitar sound, which comes in later to make sure that one shines through. Yeah, in general, everything was sidechained to the kick and clap, and I also just made sure that certain layers and instruments that needed to shine through in certain parts were being appropriately sidechained too. But yeah, the bass drone part was this part, if you don't remember. It's like, you know, there's certain parts where it comes in and out, partly because of the panning, partly just because of I just did volume automation. I just did gain automation. For this, the purpose of this layer was really just more it's ambience, it's atmosphere, it's filling out some of this frequency spectrum, as you can see. But I just wanted to create a sense of movement, almost like a swirling kind of ocean or something, you know. As the chord change, as you can see, the MIDI notes follow. And in some cases I might have done an octave up or down or something to just make it a little more interesting, but in general, the drone bass and the rhythmic bass that I just showed and the sub kind of move together as the chord progressions change over the course of the track. Alright, onto some of the higher frequency layers, which are fun. Plucks, these are the pretty little like atmospheric, Soundgarden-y, glassy things, which I just really like the sounds of these. You know, I'm not even doing anything too complicated with regards to the notes. As you can see, they're kind of like repeating similar notes. They're just kind of going up and down, playing various parts of the chords. Obviously, I wanted to make sure everything was harmonic, so I don't think there's any big dissonances in here. But if you actually look at the MIDI notes, yeah, they're just kind of playing sprinkled notes here and there, which really add to that atmosphere. Yeah, I just really like how that sounds. There's one part where it sounds exactly like my doorbell, which actually threw me off for a while. It goes bing bong. I think that part, I mean, it repeats a lot, but let me find one instance. I think, nope, not that one. And when it comes in, I think it just really makes it sound nice. But let's see where I can find it. That one. And so in the track itself, like as you lead up to it, you can't hear it too loud at that part, but like here, for example, in the track, you just hear. I just really liked how that sounded. Seemed very fitting. The actual synth is Vital. I like the, oops, once again, the R key this time has popped off. It's my keyboard. My new MacBook Pro, it's like a fully loaded M1, is coming in 2 weeks, like mid-February, February 15th. So a little Valentine's Day gift for myself. Can't wait for that, because in the meantime, like 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 keys on my keyboard are just constantly popping out. Since this some MacBook Pro from 2016. It's funny that the keys on the keyboard will be the first thing to go. What was I saying? I was saying that I like the UI of this synth. I mean, I like how it sounds, but I also just think the UI here is very clean, and it's got that nice kind of 2D feel. Anyways, good job, whoever made this synth. So this bell sound, I called it Plux, but it's kind of like a bell, is this particular Vital synth. It's got a lot of stuff going on here. It's funny, it says start init, so I probably started with the actual init, which is the initial default preset, but I must have changed it because there's a star there. Honestly, I don't exactly remember what I did, but it sounds good. And then I did stereo widen it with Dimension Expander, which is the world's simplest plugin. No, it's not the world's simplest. The simplest one is the soft tube saturation knob. Exactly one knob. Added some stereo width. Oh wow, I added stereo width twice. I'm not sure if that was really necessary, but I have this up stereo plugin here. Blah blah blah. EQ'd it, so it's mainly just there's not too much going on there. Sidechain. Yeah, it's a very pretty track. And by track, I mean sub-track, you know what I mean. Especially in the kind of intro or first third of the track, it plays an important role in kind of building up the atmosphere and the ambiance as you enter that groove. Because that's when you first start hearing high notes, right? Everything so far before that was the low bass and the groove. And then these voices come in, which we'll get to, but you know, without that, it would kind of empty. So again, yeah, it's super. Where am I? Lost my done the wrong thing. Here we go. Yeah. So yeah, the notes that these green bell pluck thingies are playing are very simple, nothing complicated melody-wise, but yeah, it plays an important role in filling out the frequencies and just adding that ambiance. So next layer here, yeah, I'll just go in order. I'll go to this little guitar melody, which when I first put this in, I was kind of like, does it fit? Does it sound weird? But I ended up sticking with it because I liked how it worked, and it was the closest thing to like a lead melody I have in this track. It's got kind of a funky feel. I guess it's debatable whether it actually sounds like a guitar, but the synth is FM8 Slapper. I tweaked some of these effects, and I did slap a saturator on there, which is a saturator that I've shown before. Makes things a little fuzzier, a little fuller. Expanded the stereo width, ozone imager, some gentle width there, compressed, EQ'd sidechains. And so this is this thing. It's like kind of funky, syncopated. How did I write these MIDI notes? I just kind of made it up, to be honest. As you can see, there's some notes here that I muted because I think I started with a lot more stuff and then cut it out until it was a little more sparse. But in terms of the notes that it's doing, yeah, honestly, I don't remember how I came up with these notes, but just kind of did what sounded good and like a little funky. I think it's still in the minor key or whatever, but D minor. Nothing too crazy, but I used a lot of offbeats, tried to make it lead somewhere, and so, to remind you of how this section sounds, it's this part. It doesn't play for that long. It's really this first section here leading into the breakdown. And then later, as you come out of the breakdown into that final drop, you bring it back, so you're like, oh, I remember this part. Yeah, that's one thing I try to do in these tracks. I try to not make it too predictable, right? So if you kind of just like look at the structure, it's not like I took this whole part and just literally copy-pasted it here. The order in which some of these instruments come in changes a little bit, but I didn't write a completely new melody either. I wanted it to sound familiar to the listener when it comes back in, and I added some of this stuff here, which we'll get to. But yeah, you can basically see that I reused elements of what I was playing before in the third section, but I kind of brought them in a slightly different order, and then at that point I also had this extra chord synth thing. And so that was only present during the breakdown. So basically when you hit this drop, you're hearing some familiar stuff from the first section, some familiar stuff from the second section, and then you hit those chord changes so that things like stay interesting and aren't like too repetitive, and then the chord changes lead to the outro, which leads to more different stuff, right? So yeah, that was the guitar track there, and then Perk Pluck here it's like the kind of percussive, plucky bell sounds. And they sound similar to the green bells that I showed, but they're more percussive. They're like, instead of like ringing out like all pretty and stuff, it's a little more, you can imagine someone like hitting an instrument. And for this one I had a lot of fun just kind of coming up with different, if I zoom in here to the actual MIDI, you can see like different chords, and they're like duplicated on octaves, so they actually get much wider over time. And by wider I mean just wider in terms of the distance from the lowest note to the top note. Like these octaves here, this is like, how many octaves is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8 octaves or something. So that makes it sound kind of grander. I also automated a ton of effects on this track. So if we just like look at this part leading up to the end of the breakdown, leading into the drop, you can see all these red dots are moving around. I automated a lot there. So let's look at what the actual synth is on this Perk Pluck. Actual synth is opening up complete control. Ooh, it's Massive X. Lovely. Noise bells. I remember I fudged around a lot with the noise parameters here to just like find something that I didn't want it to sound too clean. This part here, this plays that role. Very pretty, very, gentle, clean bells, and then these bells are like more aggressive. So that's why there's like intentionally some kind of some noise in there. I automated the amount that it's like, I automated the amount of stereo width. It gets wider over time. I have ozone imager on there. I automated attack and sustain on the transients. So like you might have noticed that over the course of the breakdown, it does become like harsher, hopefully not too harsh. Similarly, I automated the amount of saturation on it. And I even added some reverse delay for some interesting effects And I even automated the amount of reverb. So all, and automate the filter or the EQ as well. No, it looks like I just kept the EQ how it is. It's an interesting shape. But you'll notice in this section here, I'll just play this section. That's how it sounds when it starts. Then it, okay, so there's some more reverb, you might have noticed some, it's got that reverse delay effect. And then by the time you get here, it's like, it sounds different, right? It's like less reverby in a way, it's more aggressive, harsher. And now you're getting a lot of like noise and stuff. That was intentional. It's like, so it sounds different over the course of this breakdown as it goes back into the drop. So I'll just play that section. Cool. Next layer is rhythmic, what's this called? Rhythmic saw something. Basically another kind of percussive synth, but much less melodic than the perk pluck that I just showed you. This is the sounds like this. It is a little harmonic. I mean, it does have MIDI notes. I did make sure that these are all in key and are doing, you know, reasonable things, especially when the chords change later on. That was fun to figure out, like over here. So obviously there's a little bit of kind of dissonance just built into the way that synth sounds, but I did make sure that these notes are logically following what the bass line, the chord progression was doing. But the role of this layer was really just providing some rhythmic, decorative percussion that had some kind of harmonic component and helps build up the track as you progress, right? And so, you know, you may not even have noticed that layer when you first listen to it, but it does play a role. I'll just play it, the part when it comes in. I think what I like is I kind of like the way it interplays with the bass line, which is rhythmic but repetitive, right? It's doing this the whole time. Bum, 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 bum. And so, you know, the rhythmic, the purple thing here, the pink thing, is filling in some of those downbeats where the bass line might otherwise not be playing or whatever. It's just, it kind of fits together well. Of course, I EQ'd it so that it's not like too conflicting and sidechained. Although now that I look at it, I just realized that this is not sidechained to the kick and the clap, but that's okay. So yeah, so this rhythmic, what did I call it? Rhythmic saw or something like that. It is in fact a Serum synth fuzz bass. Let's play it again. Let's see. I do just like watching this. Cool little mountainscape visualization thing. Pretty normal set of effects that I have on that chain. Okay, next, bass synth. Bass with two Z's, bass. So this one was also fun. It is this sound, which you may or may not have noticed. It's almost like a low burp. It's got that reverby sound, and then there are certain parts when it's just like, I think it'll add some cool texture. I did some gliding MIDI notes you can see here, like right here. So yeah, I was kind of going for this growly, it literally sounds like a burp. And in the context of the track, fills in some of those spaces. So the bomb, bomb, bomb. Right. And then yeah, I just like the way it sounds. I like the way that it kind of played with the other layers and filled out some of that low end. It is pretty repetitive, but it doesn't play the whole time, and so, you know, even in this third drop section, it plays a role as it's building back up. Yep, so the actual synth is massive, once again. Oh, this is massive, not Massive X. The preset's called 1991, which, I don't know, feels a little nostalgic. R bass again. Wow, look at what I did with the EQ there. Let's see, let's play this track here. I did some interesting stuff with the EQ there. Bass mono. Yep. Next layer is strings synth, which only come in the breakdown to give it that symphonic, epic, kind of euphoric, orchestral feeling. This part, if you remember. Yeah, so it sounds like, I don't know, it sounds like brass, it sounds like strings, it sounds awesome. And it's doing some pretty simple chords, but, you know, that one note, bwah, bwah, like right here, you know, really plays an important role. A little chromaticism there. So yeah, these are the notes. And then the synth is Absynth, which I really like Absynth for, of course they colored it green. I really like Absynth for like long evolving sounds, more cinematic sounds. So this worked great for that. I automated the saturation over time, put this harmonic boost thing on here, and you know, I EQ'd it pretty carefully so it wouldn't be too overwhelming. But also, just as importantly, I automated the gain, and so that's why you get so much volume differences over the course of that part. I'll just solo it. Starts out quiet. As I add more octaves or more notes, I'm also increasing saturation. And yeah, it just gets more and more epic sounding as it continues. That's all. That's the entire. Well, I mean, that is all that layer does in this track. That sweet spot in the middle. I think it's actually literally the middle of the track. Yeah, the midpoint of the track's like right there. Synths. Which ones are these? Aha! These are like the. I mean, they're also kind of symphonic sounding, but it's almost like the sound is so interesting because the way I would describe it is like it's fuzzy. Almost sounds like a disco hit, but it sounds like a wind instrument or something. It sounds like someone's blowing through. Right, and so I just really liked how that sounded, and I use it sparingly to kind of emphasize the downbeats, the drops, like for example right here. Maybe that's not a good place to show it. Maybe right here. Yeah, boing. Or here. And so how did I actually make that sound? I used Silence, which I don't usually use, but it, yeah, look at that. It's literally called Key Orchestra Hit, or Orchestra Hit. So, let's see if I can just play some random notes for you. So, what is it? Yeah, it's a cool sound. I think a lot of what that fuzziness and is coming from is from this Faturator plugin, which I like a lot. So if I turn off Faturator solo arm keyboard, oh yeah, it sounds totally different. That's a very normal, boring orchestra hit, but with the Faturator, now it's cool. And yeah, that's actually all I did to it. I mean, besides the stuff here. So that's the synth layer. Extra box. Cool. This is one of my favorite parts of the track. It's near the end when it starts getting kind of like psytrance infected mushroomy with the ooh-ya-wah, this part. What's this sound? So this is when I start to have different chord changes, because we're approaching the end here, and I use this to kind of harmonize and add more stuff. It's kind of a melody on its own. It's got a lot of stereo with stuff going on purpose. I just think that part of the track sounds really cool. The synth itself is Serum. Let's open it up. Electro Phrase 2. Yeah, it's got kind of those Formant filters, so it almost sounds like a voice, but not quite. But I added overdrive, I EQ'd it, I auto-panned it pretty aggressively, or at least pretty with a rapid rate, so that's why you hear it kind of going left and right. Compressed it, sidechained it, etc. So Serum did a lot of the work for me in terms of making this sound cool, but yeah, I made sure I did some interesting stuff with the so it's got I mean, it's somewhere between a chord progression and a melody, and then as you approach the end, it kind of walks down, so helps you into that outro. Yep, and then don't worry, only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more layers. Okay, we're almost there. Wine melody. Some might say this sound is annoying, but I did like the role it played in terms of adding some of the effects, ambience, chords, harmonies. This part here, it's pretty quiet, and it only shows up twice. Once in the breakdown and once in the third section, but this is what it was. It's obviously kind of a noisy sound. It is this FM8 preset with a lot of noise. Actually, a lot of that fuzz is probably coming from the pedal, built-in Ableton pedal. I saturated it. I EQ'd it pretty narrowly, although I automated some of that movement here. Sidechained, blah blah blah, and some gain automation. So pretty straightforward, but what it does is it kind of provides a counter melody to the other synths that are going on. So like, for example, this one is going. That's pretty repetitive, I mean, although it's adding different notes and chords, but this one was just adding a little more rhythm and something a little different as the other synths are doing what they're doing, which is familiar to the listener at this point, and so this little thing just adds something different. So like, for example, when I play this part, which is right near the end of the breakdown, it fills in some of that empty space. It's kind of doing that walking kind of, and then later it does come back. And it matches the chord changes, right? So it's actually the same exact melody from here, but by the time I get over here, I'm changing that bass line chords to actually match what it's doing. So maybe if I just play the perk plucks and the bass lines, and that whiny synthesizer. Everything makes sense together. They're not moving in unison. They're moving in harmonic. Harmonics. So yeah, that little whine melody gets to shine for two little sections. Yeah. That and the string synth and this extra box thing are examples of layers that I did not use for most of the track, but just kind of come in for that one part. All right. So this guy here, which I called chord synth, you can call it, it's an arpeggio basically, repeated. It's very repetitive, but as you can see with my MIDI notes, I'm adding different notes and chords over time. Again, obviously it's matching what I'm doing with the bass line in terms of harmony, but I intentionally brought this out in the breakdown to give that breakdown more something new and interesting to listen to. So this part here, I faded in. I did a lot of gain automation here. The actual synth is FM8. EQ'd, sidechain. Plays a very important role in the breakdown. Later, when we come out of it back to the drop, it's like familiar, but it's different because it's different notes now. And I actually was pretty intentional about the gain automation here so that it's like coming in and out. Because I didn't want too much going on, and it does get kind of annoying if it's too repetitive, but in this post breakdown drop, it's cool. It's like almost like a call and response between that synth and the other stuff that's going on. Yeah, and like in terms of the note change, it starts out low, goes higher. I liked the way that this synth kind of alternated between, like when I added these octaves and stuff, or different notes. It's kind of hitting that high note, but kind of also going back down to the low note at the same time. So that's straightforward. Then you get here, and then when you add more and more. Right, it's not just playing that one note, it's kind of hopping up and down. And the other thing, oh yeah, and the reason you're hearing it kind of cut in and out, that's the side chaining. I'm side chaining to the kick and the clap. So the next layer here is these vocal risers, which I panned left and right, and they're subtle, but they provide much needed atmosphere, especially in the intro. Oh, and this is a sample, so this isn't a synthesizer. It's a sample that I, sliced up and reversed and all that great stuff, but I put a chorus plugin, chorus effect on it, and high passed it. And it looks like I did not do any gain automation, but I did do balance automation. So as you can see, it's moving right, left, middle, right, left. And some places it does it kind of fast, some places it does it slower. But important for that ambiance. This is moved from the right to the left, or the center. This is going left to right, and then back to center. And you'll notice I did some pitch bending too. So in really key parts of the track, such as near the end, when I am kind of transitioning between the sections with the bass note changes, I intentionally went into the sample, and if I can find one, here we go, clip transposition, and did a very careful pitch bend to bend into that next chord and, you know, make it sound cool. So it's that little, just quarter of a second where it goes wah. Hear that? So in the context of the track, it's, and you know, I do that several times. For example, I think there might be another one here, maybe. Yeah. So when you hear the whole track, it sounds like this. And you can hear it. It's the vocal is going from the right to the left, I think. Yep. Look at that. So I just think that little quarter of a second really sounds cool. And it goes into that doorbell sound. So. Yep. So that's the this fake choir sample, which I manipulated, the Vox Riser layer. Even till the end, it's doing stuff. Oh yeah, see, right at the end, it's doing more pitch bendy stuff. Okay, and then Vox 2 Riser is a deeper. I don't think I did too much pitch bending on this one. I don't think. But this is more just a deeper, lower voice, and some of it's reversed, some of it's just impacts, and so together with that higher pitched voice, it's helps fill out some of those, like here. It's basically crescendoing until the next section. Noise riser, you know, I'm at the riser section of my track, which I usually put at the bottom, which is transition elements between different chunks. And so when there's a drop, or when there's a mini drop, or when it's transitioning from one section to one chord progression to another, I just added a bunch of white noise. It just kind of helps separate things, make things more impactful. So yay, white noise. I love white noise. I have 2 white noise machines going in my apartment right now because I live in New York City. And you can probably hear the there's some stereo stuff going on there. Oh yeah, I'm automating the left right. Oh, it looks like I only did it in that one part. I could have done a lot more of that. Oh well, whatever. Yeah. So that the first white noise riser in the very beginning of the track is being panned. Okay, that's good though. That's important because, you know, that's kind of the first time you notice it when it gets introduced to the listener. So, you know, various crescendos here. As usual, I like playing with the warp methods, and so for this one I did it on tones, and that's why you get that kind of choppy sound, like warbly choppy. And yeah, I'm using crescendos impacts or diminuendos or whatever you want to call it. And you know, some of these are manually adjusted in volume. Some of them may have been pitched. I'm trying to remember. Are any of these transposed? Maybe, but maybe not. And so yeah, helping transition between sections such as this. And then bass riser, that one's really important too, because there's certain parts where it really just makes things sound cool. Kind of like the deep voice Vox 2 riser I just showed. You know, there's certain parts where it's just helping go from one section to the next. So for here. But then there's other sections where I've made it louder or more prominent. I think the part where you probably noticed it the most was at the end of the breakdown when I am approaching that last, or that drop, the entry to the third section. And for that one, I let it kind of shine for you know, a solid chunk of time, and by that I mean like a bar or two. And if I recall correctly, I did some volume automation on it. I played with this for a while, so it's subtle, but it actually goes up in volume, and it goes down a tiny bit in volume, and then goes up in volume a tiny bit, and then trails off a little bit as you hit that second drop. So let's listen to it by itself. Right, it's not a perfect crescendo, and I kind of like that. It's not monotonically increasing. But when you hear it in context with the whole build-up, play it. Yeah, so like those plucks at the end are kind of overtaken by the bass sound, which I kind of like. Yep. Oops, I just realized I had too many tracks turned on. Let me do that again. Yeah, one more time. Yep. Definitely one of my favorite parts of the track right there. And yeah, you know, some typical reverse and reverse swells and stuff. So at the end. And then the last layer, high riser, is this riser alarm sample, which used for similar purposes, but it has a different sound. You can just listen to it. It's got that, you know, I don't know how to describe it. That's how it sounds. It's almost like a siren, but no, more like an alarm, I guess. Yeah. And I played with the grain size and stuff. Might have even varied that, but tuned it. I'm trying to think if there's any parts where I did pitch shifting, because there might be some parts here. No, I think the pitch shift is part of the sample. But what I did do, I remember, is I carefully transposed that sample. You know, looks like I did -16 here, so that the ending, that note at the end is the same note as the track. Because otherwise it would sound like it's not like ending on the right thing, right? So yeah, so yeah, that way, you know, if you remember, wasn't there something else that I pitched up that was doing, I think it was, yeah, this choir thing, right? It goes, and so the riser alarm swell also does. It's in tune, right? So yeah, small details, but very important. Cool. What kind of stuff did I have on here? Just EQ. Oh, the R bass. I put the R bass on here. Yeah. Cool. Looks like I've been streaming for an hour, so I believe I have now walked through all of the layers. How many layers are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and then 20. But the drums layer is obviously a bunch of different stuff, so it's quite a bit. Obviously not everything is playing at exactly the same time, and obviously I'm separating it out in the mix and using sidechaining and all that good stuff, so it's not too overwhelming. I think in some of my previous tracks I have the habit of just having a lot of stuff going on at once, which can be a little overwhelming. There's definitely a lot of stuff going on in this track, particularly in this section, but I think I did a better job this time of making it a little more comprehensible and having everything fit together like a nice puzzle. Oh, I didn't show the reverb and delay. Oh yeah, I mean it's pretty straightforward stuff. I don't even think I used it that much, but a lot of these synths and stuff, you know, especially the atmospheric sounding stuff like those plucks, I have plenty of reverb on them. I'm automating that reverb over time and stuff as well, so pretty standard stuff there. And the last thing I'll show is my mastering chain, because, you know, that's always great to show. So when I was playing it earlier, I was playing the mastered version, but on my mastering chain I'm just cutting off stuff below 20. If anyone watches this, tell me if like that's not a good idea or what, but that's just like something that I've always done. I know most speaker systems like they don't go below 20 anyway, right? So what does this do? Is this necessary? I don't know. Like, does it actually cause harm because when I do this, the way the math works, like some of these other bass frequencies are affected? I'm not sure, but that's kind of what I was taught, so that's just what I always do. I just always do a sharp cut at 20. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Glue compressor, typical stuff, which I always like to do, which is, let me just play in like the middle or something. Actually, no, right here. Yeah, so I always have it so it's just doing a little bit of compression where you can see it's the arrow, the needle is just going boop, boop a little bit. Attack all the way up, release all the way down, makeup gain of a half a decibel. Very, very subtle. Ozone Imager, I really liked the stereo width of this track, and I did a little bit of enhanced space with Ozone Imager. I did set all the bass frequencies to, I think the way that this preset is actually preset, it has this thing cranked way up, which is kind of surprising because usually I wouldn't think you would want your bass frequencies to be very wide, but I set that 115 and below to 0, and I have the bass mono on here anyway, so 120 and below is bass mono. But otherwise, I liked the way that this enhanced space, the preset on the Ozone Imager, made things sound wider. And then for the actual mastering, I used Ozone Maximizer, tight bass, but I modified some of these settings, so emphasized the transients a little bit more, ceiling at negative 0.3, and I think I changed the IRC thing to modern, and I liked the way that sounded. I didn't use any extra saturator or analog simulator thingamajiggers on my mastering chain this time. It felt pretty good with just that stuff. This, as usual, is just at the beginning and the end, fade in, fade out, so nothing else besides that for the gain automation on master. And then I remember when it looks nice and full. I remember I actually did take the pre-master, send it through lander.com, and tried a couple versions there, and then did one of those blind A/B tests where I imported it into Ableton, closed my eyes, and tried to see which one I liked better, and the result was I liked my own master better, so yay for that. So that's it. That's the track. You saw the inside of the sausage factory, including I don't think I used the sausage fattener on this track, but you've seen the blood and guts. Hopefully you saw something interesting or learned something along the way. And so to close out my stream for tonight, because it's time to get dinner. I need to eat, but I will play the track straight through one more time, beginning to end, for your oral listening pleasure. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good night.